Hi, and welcome to your free training. I'm so glad you decided to come. I'm Shane, and my wife and I actually started photographing almost 9 years ago, and really started it as a profession. And we basically just immersed ourselves in training first. We bought a little bit of equipment, but we immersed ourselves in training. We spent thousands of dollars on some of the top training because we really felt like it was really important for us to learn how best to do this. We'd done a lot of things in our lives already where we learned the hard way. We're like, no, we're spending the money up front. We're going to do this. So we did, and we learned from some of our favorite photographers and just got headlong right into wedding photography, actually. And we love wedding photography, but it became something that was actually really kind of difficult to do with children. I know we still know people who do it with children, but once you have children, not only is it difficult to do, but we found ourselves photographing our kids so much. We just realized, well, this is what we love to take pictures of. And so then we just it started to shift and transform and morph kind of into photos of kids and families and kind of lifestyle, kind of candid stuff. So that's where most of our experience now has been and what we kind of grew into. So that's where this passion for photographing kids came from. And I wanted to kind of put together a training that shared in one place, in a pretty quick and concise training, all the stuff that we learned, kind of the most helpful things that we learned, because I know what it's like to be taking photos of your kids and wishing they looked better, and or taking photos of kids and feeling like it's the most difficult part of the photography session. And sometimes it can be, but there are ways to make it actually not so hard. I'm not going to say it's easy to take photos of kids, but man, once you know these tricks. Anyway, so let's get started on some of this training. But some of the stuff shared here, actually a lot of it, is going to be applicable to phone photography. If you have a good phone camera, you're going to be able to take pretty good photos of your kids with these kind of tips. Here's a quick tip. I would say I would avoid the portrait setting on your phones. If you have, like I have an iPhone and it's got a portrait setting, and it kind of gives that, like, it'll create a sharp image of your kid, but behind your kid it's like blurred out, right? That's simulating a shallow depth of field, but it's not an actual shallow depth of field, and you can tell because it'll mask around like the hair and it'll create this, it does not look good, in my opinion. If you want to use it, go for it. But anyway, I just wanted to say that briefly, that, you can do this, you can do all these tips even if you have a phone and you don't have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. However, some of the tips will be specific to using an actual camera. It will work for anything like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. So if you have one of those, this is also perfect. And a lot of families and a lot of parents and grandparents and whatever actually have them. And they're not even, photographers per se. They're not someone who wants to get into photography. They just want to know how to pick this up and use it. These things were actually designed to be used in what's called manual mode. It's a little M right here on the wheel. And manual mode means that you actually manually set your settings. Most people, since they now have this auto, where your camera decides what settings to set it to, most people have it in auto and just, photograph that way. And that's fine. Most cameras do well. And in fact, the newer the camera is, the better it actually does, usually in auto mode, because they're getting pretty smart. But that manual mode is a powerful thing to learn and know. And we're not really going to talk much about the manual mode here, but we are going to talk about a lot of things that, will be useful in manual mode and will help you understand, how this works together to make better photos of kids. So let's get right into it. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about composition. Essentially, composition is the arrangement of items or subjects or lines or space or any element in your scene. So you may have, a person in your scene and a tree and a rock and a road and a fence. And how you situate all of those in your scene when you take your photo is your composition, how it sits in your frame. Okay, so some of the things that you want to keep in mind of when you're photographing your kids is that, leaving some negative space is actually really powerful in composition. Now, there are times all of the rules, quote unquote rules, that I talk about today are rules that can and should be broken. But when you do it intentionally. That's one of the keys that we realized was, like, if you accidentally are breaking all these rules and stuff, it can kind of look messy and intentional and just like low quality photography. But if you're breaking rules intentionally for certain reasons or whatever, or to define a certain style that sets out above the rest, then do that. But And so, you know, anything I give you here, just take it loosely, but these are good guidelines at least. So leaving negative space. Now, negative space is like, for instance, it's the space around me here. Okay, so you see the space around me right here. I got it here, and there's negative space. Now, if I were to move over here, I'd have more negative space over here, okay? So negative space can be an appealing effect, and what it can do is it can isolate the subject. Everything about a composition of a photo is about drawing your eyes and attention to something. So when you're taking photos of your kids, unless you're doing something close and detailed where you're really looking at them and you're just like, or you're focused on some small detail of what they're doing or who they are, sometimes leave some negative space in there. And one of the keys when you're leaving negative space, one of the keys to understand is something called the rule of thirds. And if you don't know what that is, it's actually a grid, and it's imaginary, but they do show it sometimes on your camera. Let me see if I can find it on here. See if I can get a grid overlay. There it is. So the rule of thirds is this right here. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to look over here to make sure you can see it. Yep. You see that grid? So that is showing you basically everything set quadrants of 3 in terms of columns and rows. Okay, so there's 2 lines, 2 vertical lines, and 2 horizontal lines. Now that rule of thirds is kind of a compositional little guideline that helps you to place things that are important in your photo. So you might place a horizon here on this line, and you might place a subject here. You might place something of interest like an eyeball, somebody's eye, right on one of these intersections. Intersections are huge. So it's interesting, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it turns out that the human eye is actually considers things that are laid out along this kind of golden rule of thirds as more pleasing to the eye. Again, this can be broken. If you're trying to take a photo that has a little bit more of an edgy feel, or has some sort of like uncomfortable vibe about it, or is showing something not necessarily good about to happen, or whatever, or is a moment of tension you're trying to photograph, you might actually intentionally break that rule to kind of add more of that feeling into the photo when somebody views it. But that rule is kind of an easy way to know where to position your child when you're taking photos of them, okay? If you're trying to take a photo of your kid, instead of just taking it, I'm looking down here on my screen to see where I'm sitting in the frame, instead of just taking it dead on like this, okay, in the center, instead, try placing them on the side. I mean, I think that already looks more like, it just looks more natural, it looks more balanced, right? So it just looks more balanced than dead center like this, right? So that's the rule of thirds. That's something to do with, something to pay attention to, when you're thinking about how to compose your photo of your child. Another rule of composition is what's called leading lines. So these lines are, any lines that are in your photo are going to naturally lead your viewer's eyes to the subject, whatever your intended subject of your photo is. So if you're photographing your child or a child, you want any leading lines in the image, any really strong leading lines, to lead to that child. It's going to naturally cause your viewer's eyes to lead right to the child. It's going to make the photo make sense. And so it's going to give more of a balanced and natural and a correct feel to your photo, because it's going to make sense to the viewer when they first look at the photo. So if you have something like a road or a fence line, or when you're indoors, lines in rooms, that's why a lot of times you'll see when people take photos, a lot of times it's not straight on to the baseboard or whatever. They'll do like angles so that the baseboard is running like this off to the distance, and then the subject's here. So those lines are actually called leading lines. They're leading to the subject. They lead your eye to the subject. This is a super cool key when you're photographing outside and there's things like tree lines or horizons or the water or whatever it is. Instead of photographing them straight on, try looking for ways, or buildings, right? Architecture. Think of ways to create lines that actually have interest and lead your eye to whatever the subject is. Even if the subject isn't a person, that can work. But this is about children photography, so usually it's leading to your child, right? Or whatever your child's doing. So that's what leading lines are. And remember, another rule of composition is to pay attention to your angles. It's really important, actually, to get down on the same level with your kids. That's one of the biggest keys to photographing your children well, or whatever children well that you're photographing, is to actually get down on their level. So sometimes, again, you're going to want to break that rule, right? You're going to want to, if they're sitting down on the ground, you're going to want to come right up directly above them and photograph them straight down, and, photograph their hands in their lap or whatever they're playing with, right? Or maybe they look up at you and you're capturing their eye, and it's just like, stuff like that is cool. Be creative. But as a general rule of thumb, if you have your child out there playing in the yard and you're taking a photo and you're just standing straight up and you're just taking a photo with your phone or your camera or whatever, it's going to actually look more pleasing if you get down on the level with them. You get down and you photograph, because it's not going to dwarf the child, and it's going to bring your viewer down into whatever your child's doing. What your key is when you're photographing kids is to draw the viewer, whether that's you later on as a parent or grandparent or whatever, or the parents of the children you're photographing, right, is to draw the viewer into the child's world. That's the key. You're trying to draw the viewer into the child's world. So one of the key ways to do that is to actually get down on the level. Don't be afraid to get down on their level. So that brings me into another thing, and really kind of teed me off talking about getting into the child's world. Take details. Take details of them. This is one of the best keys I ever learned about creating variety in your photographs, is to take details and to come in close and take details of things you wouldn't necessarily normally take details of. Something I learned about the human eye, I never realized this, maybe you know about it, but I never realized this until I learned all this stuff, is that the human eye actually doesn't usually just stare at someone's eye when they're looking at a person. They dart around. People's eyes, some people more than others, but they move around. You'll look at their eyebrows. You'll look at their hairline. You'll look at their nose. You'll look at their mouth. You'll look at their ears. You'll look at their neckline. You'll look at their hands. So your eyes are moving around. Almost your focus is moving even more than your eyes, almost more than you even realize. So if you can emulate that a little bit with how you photograph, where instead of just photographing the same way and focusing on the same thing every time, try focusing on something different. Try focusing on what they're doing. If they're playing with leaves, try focusing on the leaves themselves. Even take detailed pictures of what they've done, even without them in the frame sometimes, that has their signature on it, that can add to kind of the story. Take photos of their hands, take photos of their feet, take photos of, just their eyelashes, real close-up stuff, take photos of their hair bow, take photos that crop them out of the frame and just have their wispy hair flowing, take photos of everything. So take variety and take details. This leads me into talking about candids. One of the most important things, and this is what I was alluding to when I was talking about how it can be daunting, it can be a little challenging taking photos of kids, especially if you're trying too hard. That's one of the biggest keys with kids. And it's actually a key with adults too, but it's a little harder with adults because adults have this tendency to want to they're just so self-aware. They're just so and they're doing, I don't know, that was terrible, but they're just so self-aware. It's it's so hard to get past that self-awareness. Kids, if you try to pose them too much, often you'll run into awkwardness because they have no experience posing. They're natural. They're so much less corrupted by pride and self-awareness, and they have so much of a more pure expression of genuinely who they are, that all you really need to do, and what your real goal is as a photographer, is to just kind of encourage them to express that. Encourage them to express who they are. Having posed photos is fine. Guiding them is fine. Guiding their posing is fine. But mix it in. Their attention span's like this. It's maybe even smaller. It's so short, right? Some kids more than others. So you don't want to get a kid into a posing situation where you're posing them pose after pose after pose after pose. One tip, do your poses first if you're going to do poses. Get them warmed up, but then do some poses and then just move into some candid stuff. And that way you're not at the end of a shoot and they're tired already and they're just not willing to pose. But also, don't pose too much. Do a little bit of it if you got to do it. That's fine, But the real key is to elicit response out of them, elicit something out of them, to elicit kind of their genuine, already childishness, who they are. Capture that. I'm telling you, I see so much child photography that's there's this huge rift. There's some of it that's just all posed. It's all props. It's all, which if you're going to use props, here's a side key, a free note. I didn't even write this one down for myself. Use them super simple. Like just use one at a time. I see sometimes people have like prop and prop and prop and prop and the whole scene is prop. Don't do that. Please don't do that. It's just, what it does is it brings your photography value down to like, so like if you're going to use a prop, use one. Be selective and choosy about your props, okay? I don't like to use props at all. But if you are, just do that. But anyway, what was I talking about before I got sidetracked by props? Oh, posing. So, you can pose them a little bit. That's fine, right? Just pose them a little bit. But more than that, it's going to be connecting with them. If you can get some children are very uncomfortable, some aren't. But if you can get your child or the child you're photographing to open up or to just get comfortable or to not even realize they're being like guided and photographed, if you can get them to just have an experience, those create the best photos. In fact, if you just photograph genuine, candid experiences, period, those are the actual best photographs. So if you can control things like what they're wearing and where they are, and then just set them loose a little bit, one of the keys to photographing kids is to block off plenty of time. Because sometimes there will be a meltdown. Sometimes you're going to have to wait for that. Block off plenty of time so that you can be like, it's fine. But for the actual shooting, don't take too much time. Don't take too much time doing it. Do it quick. Shoot a lot, but do it quick. And be willing to move around. Be willing to like get around and move around and switch angles and go around and everywhere, okay? So that's one of the keys. Another one of the keys is outfits. So I just briefly mentioned that, right? Take photos with neutral outfits if possible. Now, this isn't always the case. I understand. There are some, you want these people to actually express who they are, right? And you probably know that best if they're related to you, right? Like if they're your grandchild. I mean, obviously, you want them to express who they are, and you're probably going to end up photographing them in a Mr. Incredible shirt, right? Or whatever it is, bright red or whatever. And, kids love these bright colors, and that's fine. I will give you a little tip. Red is really hard to edit. I almost said that backwards, but red is really hard to edit. Because you have reds in your skins, when you're adjusting skin tones in editing, if you're someone who's taking photos in RAW format, which is a whole nother subject, but if you're taking them in RAW format and then you're pulling them into something like Lightroom and you're editing your skin tones, it's adjusting the other reds in the photos, and then you're going to have to go in and adjust the red. So if you can avoid red, do it. But I would be very clear if you're photographing clients, if you're a family photographer or a child photographer, and you're going into this, if you want an elevated style, a style that not only is timeless, but also just has like a really elevated feel where you can charge a little more for your photos, and these people are going to be really impressed, and this is going to be stuff they're going to want to print and put on their wall. Or if you're a parent or whatever, all those grandparent, whatever, an aunt, uncle, brother, sister, that you want to take those kind of photos, like just like me with my own kids. I'm not getting paid to photograph my kids, but sometimes I want those photographs that I can print and put on a wall, which I've done many times. Prints are huge. I got to tell you about that in a little bit. Don't let me forget. Anyway, so, but prints are huge, but I'm not going to print a photo of my child in a Pokemon shirt. I'm just not going to do it. It's just, I don't know. It just doesn't lend itself to that. So there's those two different kinds of things. And it's like, if you can control the kinds of outfits that these children are wearing, okay? So if you can tell your clients, give them outfit suggestions, be like, I suggest this, or these kinds of colors, or these kinds of outfits, do that. Those create the best photos. And a lot of times, clients are going to be really thankful that you're giving them some direction. They don't have to make a whole lot of choices. They're like, okay, thank you. That makes me feel better. I know now what we should all be wearing or what my kids should be wearing for this session, rather than going into it not knowing, maybe choosing the wrong thing, and then afterwards being like, wow, I really wish I had thought to not let my kid wear that for this photo. I've seen that happen. It's nuts, right? So don't be afraid to tell them what they should wear, okay? So set them up. Also, you're going to want to pay attention to location. Location is key because it has everything to do with lighting. So lighting, you're going to want, number one, you're going to want times that aren't direct sunlight directly on their face, right? You're not going to want direct sunlight on their face. You're not going to want direct overhead sunlight. If you've got to shoot during the day, try to choose a cloudy day if you can, if you're going to be outdoors. Try to choose a cloudy day, okay? If you're going to be indoors, it's fine. Create a clean, open space with a lot of neutral color and as much natural light as you can, because natural light is going to give you the best light for skin tones, especially kids' skin tones. compared to artificial lighting. Okay, natural light is, you can't beat it because the sun is huge and warm, right? Huge and warm. But I will give you this key. In the middle of the day, it's a pinpoint of bright light in the sky, and it's the worst kind of light. What you want is something that either appears to be larger or is larger and softer. So you want a diffuser of some sort. That's why cloud cover actually provides that. It's like a giant diffuser in the sky. So that'll help you. You still have to pay attention to the fact that that still has direction. The sun is still up there somewhere, and you got to pay attention to where that is. You don't want that facing them, kind of like this. You'll get these dark eye. I'm looking over here to see where I'm pointing. These dark eye socket shadows, right, and stuff like that. You want it to be kind of behind them. If it is in the middle of the day and you have bright sunlight, place them in something called open shade. Open shade is like anything that's shaded, right? It's giving shade, and your subject is in shade. But the front of it where you're standing as a photographer is open. So you've got open sky as a secondary light. The sun isn't in it. The sun should be behind them somewhere. Okay? The sun should be behind there. Not shining on them, right? But you got open sky here. That's your kind of like available light. It's your secondary light. And you've got reflection coming from here, preferably from a neutral source. If it's coming off of grass here, it's going to be green/yellow. It's going to actually put that color in their face. So if it's like a parking lot or something, that's great. It's perfect. And that'll kind of light them up, right? It'll light them up. And then try to make sure what's behind them isn't like bushes, like something real dark like that. If you have open shade, if you have something that like a grove of trees, let's say, that they're standing under, that behind it, it's kind of like sprinkly. It's kind of like you can actually see the view behind the grove of trees maybe. And that way they have light behind them too, and it's kind of filtering through and stuff. That's open shade. Okay, it's kind of like a softer, sprinkly type of shade, and you got to pay attention to the angle of the light. Again, you don't want the light shining on the front of them. It gives them terrible shadows in the face, gives them harsh sunlight. It's just the worst look. You want it kind of behind them, and if it's real low, if it's like in the evening or in the morning, and it's behind them, you might not want it directly behind them unless you're trying to get silhouette, unless you're trying to get like glowy edges, and you're able to do that with a reflector maybe. You can get a pop-up reflector and light up their face still and get all that. You can do that. But there's a little tip called light wrapping, and I also wasn't planning on telling you this. I'm giving you too much information for free. Light wrapping is super cool. So you got your subject, you got the sun behind them, but put it at an angle behind them, like here or here, right? And if it's coming at an angle, it's going to actually hit them like here, and it's going to wrap around just enough to give them more definition than just a flat backlighting. Okay? That is super key for kids. Super key. So pay attention to those things. Pay attention to the angle of your lighting, the source of your light, how harsh or diffused your light is. Pay attention to all of those things, okay? Okay, so talked about outfits, talked about neutrals, talked about how bright colors are kind of more difficult, and they're kind of like a less elevated style. So if you're going for elevated, if you want to elevate, if you want to charge more, if you want to kind of hit that luxury market of child photography or family photography, go with neutral colors. What I believe, I do neutral colors for everything now. Like I love neutral colors in my home, in my, like everything. I love neutral colors because I like the fact that when I have neutral colors, I can put whatever color I want in there. I can have a neutral colored living room, and then I can put splashes of green in there, and I can put orange in there during the fall, and I can put colors in there that the neutral just kind of complements, right? I think that people look most complemented in neutral colors, okay? Sometimes it's different. I understand, and sometimes you want to break those rules. Sometimes it's a different vibe you're going for. Sometimes it expresses someone differently to have bright or bolder colors, right? But the neutrals tend to give it, in my opinion, it tends to highlight the person. It tends to be less distracting. So for kids, that's one of the things that I think helps to represent their kind of their purity and their innocence too. Is kind of like a neutral color vibe that kind of just highlights who they are. Helps you to focus. Again, it's kind of like a compositional technique. Helps you to not be distracted and focus on what the actual subject is, which is the child. Okay. Some other tips that I would give is to use back button focusing on your camera. That is, when you set your camera to use one of these buttons, you can go into custom controls in here and set this to be your focusing button. What that does is allows you to focus and then lock focus. So you focus and lock, and boom, boom. You can capture some photos that way. I would also pay attention to wider apertures. If you're not sure what that is, you might want to do some research on like how aperture affects your image. Or also, I have a photography course that's actually everything. If you're really new to this and you want to learn like everything digital photography from exposure all the way and just learn everything, I have a course for that, and I'll talk about that at the end as well. But Aperture, I would choose wider apertures most of the time. And again, that's kind of a compositional technique because it causes the eye to focus on what really matters. And it helps you to kind of connect with like the feeling of the photo. It helps the viewer connect with the feeling of it, to get into the child's world. You know what I'm saying? It helps you get kind of close. Kids are often hyper focusing on real close things. It's just what they do. So that's what the aperture, wide aperture kind of emulates. So I would suggest that. And I would also suggest manually choosing your focus points. So your focus points are like, let me show you real quick. Wow, I sounded really southern when I said that. Let me show you real quick. So your focus points are these little things, these little guys in here. You see these? You see how I'm moving that? So those are all my potential focus points, and I'm able to move where my camera is going to focus. So I can do that and focus there, and that's where my focus point is going to be. And so I've learned how to do this quickly. Obviously, it takes a little practice, but I can do this and set it so that it focuses quickly on the child's eye or whatever, their hand or whatever I'm trying to focus on. And usually if the child's face is in the photo, unless you're intentionally not trying to focus on the face, usually the eye is where you want to focus, and it's usually the eye that's closest to you. That's going to give them, again, the most comfortable feel. And again, a general rule that if you want a different vibe, break the rule. Just break the rule. But if you don't, stick to this rule. It just gives a more comfortable feel. It helps people not be distracted by the feeling of the photo and to really connect with what's there. Okay? So those are some super cool tips. And another tip is to practice. Follow your kids around for a while if they're your kids. If they're kids that you're taking pictures of, do a lot of shoots, do a lot of shoots, maybe host mini sessions and do a whole bunch of them for relatively inexpensive to get experience. If this is a new thing for you, get some experience. You cannot replace experience when it comes to photography. This is something I say in my courses. This is something I say over and over and over again to everyone that I teach about photography is you can't replace experience. You can learn all you want. You can come to these free trainings. You can buy my course. You can do this. You can do that. But you can't. If you don't practice, if you don't pick up your camera and do it till it becomes second nature, which doesn't take that long, you just got to be committed to it. It's never gonna happen for you. You've got to actually just do it. So pick up that camera and do it. And that's another thing I was gonna say is take a lot of photos. Take a lot of photos. Yes, they take up room. Storage isn't that expensive anymore though. Put them on an external drive. I just got this 1 terabyte. A terabyte. It's 1,000 gigabytes. Little hard drive, and they're tiny now. I don't know if you can see it. Look at this little thing. It's a solid state drive. It's a whole terabyte, okay? I just got that for like $60. They're relatively inexpensive. You can get a lot less for that, for a lot less, obviously. But it's a way to store your files if you need to, blah, 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 right? Take a lot of photos. A couple of tips for this. A couple of tips for photo management. 1, take a lot, but then cull. Culling means to actually go through the shoot after you shot it and take out duplicates, take out stuff that didn't turn out right, and remove it. So I would suggest uploading your files to, your computer or whatever after you photographed a huge shoot. Like my wife and I, we used to go to these weddings, and we would promise our clients, our wedding clients, like 800 to 1,100 photos. That was our range. We're like, we'll give you 800 to 1,100 photos depending on, how long the wedding is and whatnot. And we would go there and we would shoot 3,000 or 4,000 photos. I would come home like, trying to sit here culling through photo after photo after photo after photo after photo. Spent days culling, literally days, because I didn't have all the tools necessary either. It's good to have the tools. But anyway, you don't have to shoot thousands. But if you shoot a lot, if you photograph a lot, go in and cull them right away. Make that the first thing you do is cull. Okay? Go in and cull. And if you're a parent and you're just taking these pictures to have them, cull them anyway. It can be painful. You're like, I don't want to delete these photos. But part of the problem with having the ability, the accessibility to take so many photos is we have libraries on our phones of 8,000 photos. I think there's 8,000 something on my phone. That's why I went with that number. I'm never gonna go back in and scroll through that many photos. I'm just never gonna view them. So it takes away the whole point of having them anyway. I would so encourage you, go in and cull, take out duplicates, take out stuff that wasn't quite right, and just save the best ones. Save the best ones. You're much more likely to go in and enjoy them. And if you're a photographer who's doing this as a job, definitely cull them down to the best. Because 1, it's good to deliver a lot of images to your clients, but it's not good to deliver a lot of crappy images. You want the best images to really, really shine. And it also will help you to not get burnt out with the editing process, to actually take your time and edit them really, really well and blow their minds. And it'll also give them a gallery. Oh, that's a personal testimony. It'll give them a gallery that they're more likely to be able to go through and handle. That's what I was going to say. Our wedding photographer, Ashley and I's wedding photographer, she had a process where she would photograph the wedding and then she would let us call them. So she gave us a few discs. It was CDs back then. It was a few discs of photos that were not edited. They weren't culled. There was just thousands of photos. And we were like, it was absolutely overwhelming for someone who's not a photographer. Hopefully you're not doing this, but like, we never went through them. Like, we've looked through them, but we never went in and culled them. That's like somebody's job, you know, like that's not the client's job. So don't give your client so many photos that they feel overwhelmed by how many you're giving them. That's a key. That's a good point, Shane. Anyway, so that is one key I would tell you. But take a lot of photos, but call them afterwards, okay? And then the last thing, print photos. Print photos. Offer prints, guys. Prints aren't a thing of the past. Okay, most people have all their images in digital, and digital's great. You can have more photos, you can store them more easily, but there's something so special about print. There's just a connection there. There's something that honors the photo and honors the subject of the photo more when it's printed. And I can't recommend more getting albums printed. So I've gotten a few for ourselves and a few for clients, but like, albums are absolutely incredible ways to store your prints in a way that showcases them, and it gives them a very valuable feel, which it just lends, like, that'll add on top of the fact that now you're going to photograph these kids with, like, you know, just such an elevated style, and you're going to have so many details and just connections with who they are, and it's going to be like, whoa, when people look at these photos, they're going to recognize the subject, and they're going to get right into the child's world, and they're going to feel connected to the moment. And it's presented in this thing that's like, you know, leather bound and thick pages and just beautiful prints. On the topic of prints, I've got to say, be careful about who you get printed through, because if you get printed through like Walmart, go Google it real quick, or search it. I mean, Google, but go search it, go Google it. Look at Walmart versus MPix or White House Custom Colors, who we use for our wall prints, like color. Look at those two versus each other color-wise. And like, people have shown examples, you can look them up, where somebody was like, I got the same picture printed here at Walmart and then here at White House Custom Color, for instance. Totally different. Like, Walmart labs, or I'm not just trying to pick on Walmart, like any labs that aren't a pro photo printing lab aren't going to have the kind of, they're not going to handle the image properly, and they're not going to properly represent the colors that are there. So especially if you're going to put these things on your wall, make sure you get like a high quality studio to do it. We get White House Custom Color, and we get Standouts. Standouts is like one of their cheapest options. You know, you can get like all these super expensive types of prints, which is fine if you want to do that. That's super cool. We get these Standouts, which are cheap. They're just printed on like a foam board, like this big, but they're not that expensive. And the nice thing about a pro photo lab is that they don't fade either. Like, some of these cheaper labs are going to fade, and it's just, get pro photos. I'm going to link to White House Custom Color. I'm going to link to that. The other thing I'm going to link to, I got to tell you about this, Kiss Books. You may have heard of them. Kiss Books is like, it started out for like wedding photographers and stuff, because they're like wedding albums, boom. But they have so many options. They have small options like photo album options. They have different kinds of books and stuff like that. But their quality is absolutely through the roof. They are expensive. They are very, very expensive. I spent, I think, $500 on one of the albums that I printed for my wife, like as a gift. It was like a special photo shoot we did with the kids, and I just printed on there, and it was very, very expensive. So do that if you want to spend a lot. If you're a professional photographer and you're trying to go for an elevated style in a luxury market, maybe offer that. Maybe get one printed, through your business, and have it as an example to physically show your clients, and they'd be like, whoa, imagine if I had that sitting on my hall table, like imagine if that was on my nightstand in my bedroom, like, so quality is amazing when it comes to prints, but on a much cheaper scale. You may have also heard of Chatbooks. Chatbooks is super cool. I'll leave a link to that below as well, but Chatbooks is something that they just have these little printouts, like these little books. It's like 30 pages long, and you can there's different products they have some that are like hardcover, some are this, some are that, but you can get them super cheap. It's almost like just a little pamphlet from phone photos to camera photos, whatever you want. Either you can do it where you choose 30 photos, like you can do a subscription where you choose like 30 photos every month, and every month you'll get the 30 photos you chose printed out, and they'll just ship it to you every month you get one of these tiny little books, and you can just stack them up, and you have these little beautiful little prints of your favorites, all your favorites. If you're a pro photographer, suggest these to your clients. They'll love them. Or maybe even send it as a gift after the shoot, since they're so inexpensive. I think they're like $5 or $6, maybe $8 a piece. They're so cheap. Just get one as a print. I might be wrong. It might be 12 or 15 bucks. I have to look that up. Sorry. Now you're gonna get all these messages. It was $30. Maybe it is. I don't know. But they're very inexpensive. I don't think they're $30. But get some of your favorites of their photo shoot printed and send it to them. They'll be like, what? It'll be so cool. Do that. Go above and beyond for your clients. But anyway, these little chat books, or you can get them, connected to your Instagram reel if you're like a parent or whatever, and you can just choose your 30 favorites from every month from your Instagram, posts, and get this printed. Super cool chat books. I'll leave that linked below as well. So all of that to say, now you have a bunch of tips. I'm so glad you came to this free training. You have a bunch of tips that'll help you to photograph children better. You have tips from everything from composition and negative space and leading lines and angles and getting low and connecting with the moment and photographing every little detail and taking lots of photos and culling everything and neutral outfits and like all of these things, right? Connecting to the moment, telling the story, connecting your viewer to the moment with the child. You have all of these tools. Go out and do it. Go out and do it. And also, because you guys took this free training, you took that initiative, and you stuck around, I want to give you a very special discount on my beginner's photography course. It's called Mastering Digital Photography for Beginners, and it's a complete comprehensive course from beginning to end. If you're just beginning your photography journey, or if you're someone who has a DSLR or a mirrorless camera and you just really want to know how to use that thing better, how to actually take all of the settings that are in that camera, understand what they mean, and understand how to use them properly to manually control what your images look like. If that's you, I want to give you a really special discount. Now, this discount isn't something I'm going to give to everyone. It's just for my free training students. So if you want to understand things like the exposure triangle, aperture, your ISO, your white balance, whatever your weak point is in photography, if you're just starting out and you haven't invested in educating yourself yet, remember, that's the best thing that my wife and I ever did for our photography business, was invest in education. And now, unfortunately, we did it the slow way, and we did like piecemeal here and there, and we did a lot of different things, and it took us years to compile all that training. And it does take time, and a lot of it is experience, and it is, getting behind the camera and actually taking the photos and putting in the work. But that's one of the unique and powerful things about the course that I've created, is that it isn't just a talking head course, kind of like this is just, me talking to you directly and telling you a bunch of good information. The course is a very comprehensive course. It's 10 video lessons within the course that cover all the details. Each and every single lesson comes with actionable worksheets that actually walk you through practical application of the lesson. So it takes what I just taught and gives you a way to actually go and work those things out so that you get hands-on experience, so that you can actually apply what we just learned and learn it in a very fundamental way, so that you can actually take, your camera, pick up your camera, and get the hands-on experience for the lesson that I'm teaching. So by the end of the course, you've gone from just being someone with a camera to someone who's actually a trained photographer. You've actually been trained in how to use that camera in manual mode. So these cameras, whether it's a DSLR or a mirrorless, they were actually designed to be used in manual mode. And then the camera makers, put in automatic modes because they wanted it to be easy for everyone to use as well, where, someone can just pick it up and point and shoot. Problem is, with a point and shoot camera, you can only control so much of what your image looks like. You can only actually control the creative part of it so much. And so the point and shoot cameras aren't made for photographers. They're not made for people who want to develop a style and actually have an established and defined type of image that they're going for and be able to really control what that image looks like in the end product. They weren't designed for that. And so that part of DSLR and mirrorless cameras wasn't designed for that. And so these DSLR and mirrorless cameras, for people who are photographers who want to control these types of things in their cameras, they were designed to be used in manual mode. First reaction might be, oh, manual mode sounds really difficult and clunky. Why can't I just pick it up? Because your camera is deciding everything for you. And that's not that's not taking creative control into yourself. That's giving creative control to your camera. So anyway, all that to say, you'll be able at the end of this course to understand your camera inside and out. You'll be able to get those images you're looking for. You'll be able to get tack sharp focus every time. You'll be able to get blur if you want it. You'll be able to get shallow depth of field. You'll be able to understand those things. You'll be able to understand what creates bokeh and how to get it. Understand where and how to get those money shots. Understand long exposure photography. Understand the absolute fundamental basics and get them rock solid for any kind of photography, whether you're photographing weddings or portraits or families, or you're doing night photography or astrophotography or sports photography or wildlife photography or nature or landscape or architecture or whatever it is, journalism. All of these types of photography need to understand manual photography. Understand using your camera in manual mode. It's absolutely essential. And so this course was designed for that purpose. It wasn't designed to go beyond that and into any specific niche of photography, but it was designed to give you a very solid understanding and then practical application of. It gives you the practice. Remember the PDF worksheets that it comes with. It comes with everything. So I really encourage you, if you are a beginner photographer, if you're just starting out your photography journey and this is something that you need to learn, or if you're someone who has a DSLR or a mirrorless camera and you just really want to learn how, you love taking pictures and you really want to learn how to use the camera in a creative way that allows you to get photos that look better and that look more like a style that you prefer. If you find yourself, scrolling through Instagram or whatever and looking at beautiful pictures of, whatever you like taking pictures of, whether it's, your family or scenery or whatever it is, and you just like, man, I wish I could get that. This course is for you. So let me tell you what this course is worth, okay? What I'm listing this course for isn't what it's worth. What it's worth, I personally believe that it's worth a lot more than what I'm listing it for. But that's just because I've put a lot of time, and not only time, but experience. I've put a lot of experience and condensed it down. I've taken a lot of training that I've done myself and gone through and learned the hard way even on some of these things, and I've condensed it down into a very succinct course, okay? So to me, the value is a lot higher than what I'm actually listing this course at. And I'm listing it at this price because I want to make it accessible to everyone. I want everyone to be able to take this course if they really want to advance their photography journey, if they really want to take that next step towards becoming a professional photographer or just improving their photos and understanding what makes a good photo. And so I have this course listed for $297, and that is not what you're going to pay, because remember, I told you I want to give you a really special discount because you're here, because you stayed. I want to make this something really special for you. Now, this is going to be only for a limited time, so I want to let you know that up front, but I want to make this course available to you for only $97. Yes, you heard that correctly. So $200 off. It's not like 50% off or something like that. I'm slashing this price down for you. I really, really, really want to honor the fact that you came to this free training, that you learned all of this. Okay, you learned everything we talked about today. You learned all about how to get, better angles and better lighting and better focus and better, you learned a whole bunch of stuff, and you stayed to the end, so it proves how committed you are to learning about photography, to learning and making your business better. Remember what I told you, that is one of the best things that my wife and I ever did for our photography business, was actually invest in education. So it's extremely essential. And you can do this the hard way like we did. You can go and you can learn all of the things. You can go to YouTube and, piecemeal together this, that, and the other from all these different teachers and learn all of the things that way. You can, but it's a long process. It takes a long time, and that's why I've built this course. I've literally built this course to actually be a remedy to that problem and actually give you a very succinct and start to finish catapult, really, for understanding photography and being able to apply it. This discount is for you only. It's only for my free training students, okay? I'm not offering this to everyone else. This is not what this course is listed at, but it is what it's listed at for you. And I'm taking a deep breath because it's a huge discount. And so I want you to understand that it is only for a limited time. But this $97 is not $297 slash that price. We're going for $97, okay? I want you to think about where you want to go with your photos. I want you to think about what you don't understand about your camera. Whether when you pick your camera up, you feel like you're a little bit lost, or you feel like there's parts of it that you don't understand, whether it's white balance or whether it's how to create the right aperture at the right time for the right kind of circumstances or situations. If you feel overwhelmed by those kinds of things, this course can really, really help you. And it's a really succinct course, but they're powerful lessons. And I've condensed them down into very succinct categories in order to teach you one lesson at a time, one very specific part of this photography, big picture. No pun intended. $97 today. It's not $297. You can get courses like this for more than $297. And like I said, I do believe that it's worth more than that. And I really mean that. I do believe that it's worth more than that, just because I know what went into it. I know not only the experience that went into it, but the time that went into building it. I'm not going to list this for very long at this because I will probably lose money time. And I also want to honor the fact that this is for you, and that you did stay to the end of this training, and you did put in the time and the effort and the initiative to actually grow your photography. So I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. And I thank you for coming today. I thank you for staying and listening through. I thank you for hopefully taking notes. So anyway, click that link below. Make sure that you get this course for the low price that it's at right now. I'll see you in lesson 1.